So again, let me just revisit this because I want to start with working group 1. I hope all of you received this within working group 1, and again, your contact information is on there, your email addresses. One of the first tasks that we wanted from each of you was just to ensure that you elected a team leader, or you came to an agreement on who the team leader would be. I hope that there's been a little bit of communication, but if there are, or if you're running into any challenges in that regard, is there anything that you would like us to assist you with? Has this kicked off, or would you like some kind of assistance with this?
Hey, Alex, this is Neil.
Hi, Neil.
Hey, one question is maybe if we can have each group kind of present where they are, what they've done, and any issues that they have. So if we could get a representative for each one of the groups, the lead, if you've selected the lead. Anybody from group 1?
I can see a few of them here.
Yeah.
I can see Rita. I think I saw Lena. Has there been any
I'm
progress?
sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, Lena, we can hear you.
I'm here. I'm from group 1.
Thank you. Has there been any progress, Lena? Any movement?
No, not really.
Okay.
The last time we were gathered, there was just 3 of us that were there, so we haven't even gotten in contact with anybody else.
Okay.
There was, if I remember, me and Rita.
Okay. Yeah, I think we might need to offer some assistance there to you guys on this. And then I also want to post the I had recommended that some of you join the WhatsApp group that we had set up, so that maybe you would use it as a way to communicate or to find out the details from each other, communication details from each other.
I have joined the WhatsApp group. I don't know if the other people from the group have or not.
Okay. Let's let me quickly jump onto group 2, because you have told me that group 1 really little to no movement. So let me quickly dive into group 2.
Okay.
Just one moment, please. Okay, this is group 2. Do we have anybody from group 2 here? I think I saw Cheers, and I think I've seen Ya as well. Any movement from your side? Hello? Cheers, can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's just to remind you that there are some deliverables that are due at the end of this month. And this is the one for group 2. It's just to get together and just work as a team. Yes, hello?
We are yet to convene our first meeting.
Yes.
There's been no movement, is it?
Okay. So I sense that this might be the same going forward, even possibly into group 3. But it's a reminder that for all groups, there are some timelines and some deliverables that we would like you to achieve over the next 3 months. So looking forward, as of right now, we have possibly about 3.5 weeks to go to be able to deliver the first timeline on the 30th of September. There is equally one for group 1 that I did not share beforehand here. But I think it's important that maybe we set aside some time just to ensure that we get everyone in one space, just to kick off this movement and to create some momentum. So I think, Neil, that we might have to set aside some time to do so with each of these groups. I don't know if group 3 is the same. Saad, I know you're here. Has there been anything on your side of things?
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Yes.
For our side, I just take the initiative yesterday to send an email to all the group to align how we organize ourselves and to organize the first call in order to designate working group leader, and I propose to also designate a co-pilot and also to identify the person in charge of the secretariat.
Okay.
I received the first answer from let me just find the name, a colleague from Nairobi, I think. Yeah, and but I have a problem with a mail listing because I received 4. Let me check again. Yeah, 4. I think that 4 emails email addresses are
Correct.
incorrect. Yeah, and
Okay.
one colleague from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Ghana, and Mustafa Khalil from Egypt. I can send you this later to just check from your side. Okay.
Please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah. And thank you so much also for reaching out to the group. But I think what we will do is I think that we might just see if we can offer you some assistance maybe next week, just to get the groups going. And then from there, we want you to be able to work this, to do it a little bit independently as we work on the session separately. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Yeah.
But I think the issue is that we haven't even gotten in contact with the other people from the groups. For example, from my in group 1, I've just met 3 people out of like 15 people. So it's the same people that are present to these calls every week, and we haven't seen the others. So how do you think we can solve this kind of problem?
Yeah, I think we just have to set it up in a way that we invite them. Maybe we set aside separate calls for each of the working groups and then invite the members of each of the groups into those sessions. And then maybe from there we can do the introduction, and then just ensure that everyone knows everyone, and then we can get the working groups going. I do agree with you that sometimes we usually get the same people showing up over and over again, and then there are others that haven't shown up yet but have expressed the interest in the working groups that they want to join. So it's just the ability to set up the time that everyone can get together. So for example, let's say for group 3, as is right now on this page, it's just to contact all of these people and then set up a meeting where we have everyone in this group attend that session, and then we can start creating the momentum and the push for the group to start moving forward. Yeah. I don't know, Neil, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think let's discuss internally how we can get everyone involved in this. Yeah, I mean, it's important that everybody that signed up for the program here that does participate here. So Yeah, let's talk internally and then we can provide some assistance moving forward.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for that. It was just a brief check-in just
No,
to see.
Alex,
Yes.
if you can kindly show us the various groups again, so we could take note of the persons that we're supposed to be in the groups with the email addresses will be helpful.
Okay. Okay. And I did, I don't know if you received it. I did share this with each of you.
Oh,
So
okay.
yes, I did.
Okay. I might
So
have missed it. So
I will resend them. I'll resend them again this evening after our call to each of you, and then I will take a look. And thank you, Sad, for bringing that to my attention. I'll take a look at where the emails may have gone wrong, but I will reshare it with each of you again at the end of this call. Okay. So yeah. So thank you very much, everyone. I want to again just we revisit the session that we had last week, and then this is another continuation in the finalization of that session. I see Elias is on the call with us, so I want to hand over to him so that he can proceed with the session that we had a week ago. So Elias, let me hand you some the rights here to co-host, and then you are good to go now. Hello, Elias. Elias, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's an opportunity to connect again, and I think we'll kind of pick it from where we left last week. The goal for this session will be to kind of do a deep dive on Sandbox design parameters and what we really need to think about when you're designing sandboxes. The other part of what we'll be doing, and I think I mentioned this, will be more of a hands-on kind of developing a sandbox risk assessment tool that will kind of set pace for the group one team in terms of what really needs to happen. And with this, I think we will try and work with that team together with all of us here to get that over the line. So I'll want to put my slides on the screen just to get us going. I'll see how far we can go today. Because again, I mentioned this will be a 3-part series. We've already done the first part. Today, we want to get into the second part. Then if time allows, we'll kind of have a quick view of the third part. If we don't do that, then we'll essentially put that to be part of next week. But out of the key outcomes that I intend for us to get out of this is to come up with a sandbox risk assessment toolkit that can be implemented and used in practice with all of us as a team, and maybe we'll kind of be the first team to put something together that can be demonstrated within the regulatory ecosystem. Now, I did also request us to get more people to attend. I hope we'll get more people joining. Last week we were around 20. This week we are around 15. But if you know anybody that is within our teams and even other regulators that haven't joined this, let's push that as a team. If there are team members within your organization that haven't joined, please let them know that we have started. And also, Alex, we can check out on who have not managed to join, and we reach out to them so that they can be able to join. Because I think importantly, would be to not miss the second part. If you miss the second part, then you won't manage to understand what we'll be doing on the third part. So let me put this on screen and then we get going. Maybe before I start, it would be good to kind of get to hear from the team. What were some of the key highlights from our part one session last week? If you can remember, or if somebody wanted to quickly just kind of, you know, tell us what was one of the key things that stood out for him or her in our last engagement. Anybody that want to go out?
Elias,
Go.
if I can say, the first part was very important because as I'm not involved in this area in my daily work, I understand what is a sandbox and what are the kind of sandbox that we can implement in an area, and this was very clear and very important to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know we did ask Alex to kind of give us some metrics around it. So as we proceed, we'll kind of show you what most of us think as the best model for the sandbox. Thank you very much for that response. Anyone would want to add? Kagiso?
Yes, I think for me, coming from an authority that's still to implement a regulatory sandbox, it was interesting getting to get a feel of why jurisdictions would adopt different approaches because with some of our counterparts, I think Namibia, when we talk to them, they do the cohort approach, while I think Mauritius does the rolling up approach. So I think it was very insightful in terms of just getting to understand and maybe also doing some kind of superficial assessment to say, would we have the resources to adopt certain models, the different models that are available or are at our disposal? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kagiso, for that. Again, different models, resources, and why and what we really need to consider while implementing them. That's very insightful on really pushing or bringing that out. Any one last person before I jump into this?
Hi, Elias.
Hi.
So one key thing, aside the different models that are being used in different jurisdictions, were the tools we should focus on in terms of the engagement, the regulatory aspect, the supervisory aspect, and then the monitoring. That's one thing I also picked up from the first session.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sessions and what really needs to be considered at different aspects, so regulation and among its other things, including the resourcing. I've seen two hands. Is it two hands of people waiting into the room? Alex?
And we have Lina's hand up.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say there was interesting last time about regulatory authority could use fees in the context of a sandbox, and it made me think because I never realized there would be something that startups would have to pay for because it is a kind of service that is provided by the regulator to help these people build their companies. And it also made me think about the level of help that an authority is willing to provide to these startups, and then maybe it would be a free service if the help, if the support is at minimum level, and it could be up upscaled within some kind of context with a fee that would be provided by the startups. So it was an interesting subject for me to think about.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, so again, very important in there. In terms of whether these particular services should be paid for and what it entails in terms of the service that you guys provide us as regulators. Right, super. I think we'll keep on conversing again today. And my intention today is kind of, get into the engine of it in terms of the design and what do we really need to consider while designing a sandbox. And these will kind of lay ground on a risk assessment because the risk that any regulatory authority will face in terms of implementing a sandbox will highly be dependent on the design parameters that we'll be considering today. So just to get to go ahead, I would really want us to start from a sandbox process. How does a sandbox process work? And maybe you guys would have various ways in which looking at where or which department this should sit in. For instance, if you look at it from a Kenyan regulatory purpose, then it used to sit under Research and Innovation Department. I know there's a fintech department at ACAPS. So there are different departments. There's a research and innovation in Uganda. So you really need to look at a department that will act as a key facilitator. So that is a very important element. So who owns the sandbox process? And how then does it interact with other parts of the organization from a regulatory standpoint? Then from there are different phases around the sandbox, and we'll be looking at these particular phases in much more detail. So we have an application phase. Once you've set up a sandbox, we have a preparation phase. How then do you prepare the documentation that have been provided? We have the testing phase. Once the company has been admitted, what do you really need to look at during that particular phase? Then we have what most of the time we look at the graduation phase. And when we talk about the graduation phase is how do you exit the innovator? Now, this is just like a school. Somebody has applied to join a class. You have to prepare the person. He has to do an exam. Either he passes or fails. So if he fails, how do you exit him? If he passes, how do you exit him? So think about it from a school perspective. Now, when it comes to it when we look at it from the application phase, there are different objectives from a regulatory standpoint. Then you will have to put into consideration. The first thing is your selection process. How do you select eligible participants based on your developed eligibility criteria? So there are two things here. You have to develop an eligibility criteria. And remember, we kind of looked at this in our session, in our first part session. And also you have to make sure that the eligible participants are the ones that are selected in the long run. And the second thing is you have to look at the sandbox operational structure. Now, remember on our first phase, we talked about different types of structures and different types of sandboxes. And the key thing would be you need to assign application to reviewers to do like a preliminary assessment of both the feasibility of that innovation and also the risk that this particular organization will cause to the entire financial sector and in particular the insurance sector. And then the last phase, the last thing around this phase will be more information, wherever you might need further information, or you might need to require them to provide information or provide them with information advising the applicant whether they need to provide more information or you need to redirect it to a different pathway. So here, the key things that you have to put at the back of your mind is one, the eligibility criteria that has been developed and whether there are eligible participants around it. Two, what is the operational structure? What type of sandbox have we kind of put in play? And do we really need further information? And if in the case whereby there's no fit in terms of what we are pushing for as a regulator, then how does that kind of information get communicated to the to the insurer, to the Insurtech? Now, this kind of shows, I would say, a diagram around how that particular process looks like. So if you look at step one, the biggest question that we'll be asking ourselves, and when we'll be developing this risk assessment tool, we'll be looking at the eligibility. Now, think about your eligibility criteria. Can we be able to create an assessment structure around it? So maybe your eligibility criteria is that this company must have 1, 2, 3 elements. So do they have a founder? Do they have a co-founder? What is some of the basic level of understanding of these guys when it comes to the insurance sector? So we're kind of looking at that. Is the company already registered in one or the other? Do they have some basic business registration requirement? So with that, we can have yes, no, and then kind of come up with the first level of assessment. And the next element will be looking at two things. Remember, within the sandbox, and the reason why you are starting a sandbox is to check whether the application is desirable. And when we talk about that, is it trying to solve a particular issue within the sandbox? And then two things that comes in mind is benefit assessment. How will it benefit the industry? And then you can rank that benefit assessment from red to green. And we can come up with a structure of assessing that based on your the model that you've adopted and what you want to see coming out for the industry. If you are looking at inclusion, how many people are you thinking that this particular solution will bring into the insurance space? Is it solving a problem that as an industry you'd want to have? You want it to be solved. Then the other thing will be risk assessment. What happens in terms of failure? How much exposure are you likely to pose yourself as from a regulatory standpoint? So these two elements have to be combined, because most of the time you'll get that a solution will have a very good benefit, but also on the other hand, it's a bit risky. So in this case, then you're saying, I'm saying the risk level is a bit medium, not it's a bit high because it's on the orange. So if you combine both these two elements, then you'll get the test, you'll kind of test desirability of getting that particular element to the market. So there's an intermediate element around it, whereby as you kind of combine that, you might want to take it back and say, okay, fine, can you enhance the benefit? Can you reduce the risk? And then it goes back under the second step. And that is what you see at step 5, or whereby I'm talking about enhanced benefit or reduce risk. And then once it goes, then you can take it to the next stage where are we approving to proceed with this organization to be part of the sandbox, or are we not approving? So that's what you see on step 6. Now, this kind of just demonstrates the steps, but this can easily be curated on a risk assessment toolkit for the purposes of you even having a criteria for you to determine the level of risk and even advise your board or committee that deals with that. Then the second phase will be the preparation. And here, the key thing would be to look at the objective that has been set and ensuring that the objectives are transparent, are structured in terms of the foundation of really ensuring that we have a successful testing. Now, there are a couple of things then you as a regulator will have to think about. And the first thing would be, as a regulator, you need to develop and share core elements that will inform applicants on the testing plan. And there are a couple of things then that comes in mind. The first thing that comes in mind is around the roles and responsibilities that will kind of align between the innovator or the insurtech, the regulator, which is you, and the other stakeholders. So that has to be properly defined. How then do we communicate? What are some of the protocols that surround the innovator? How do they approach their customers? Are there key things that needs to be mentioned for the customers, just to be aware that this is still a testing exercise? The second thing is resources. So as part of the preparation of the insurtech, they should be able, and you as a regulator, you should be able to require them to put some form of some resources in place. And this will ensure that as they prepare for the testing process, then they have availability of technical, financial, and human resources necessary for conducting a test. Remember, there are certain things that will require their technical capabilities. Do they have like a system that in one or the other will enable them to pay claims if they are looking into providing a 360 type of support to the ecosystem? Finance, are they able to meet their obligations? And most of the time, what we mean by this financial aspect is what we say the quantum of risk. Assume that this company tells you that, look, we are going to support 1,000 people with this product that we are rolling out. The first question is that you might need to have, do you have some, what do you anticipate as your loss ratio? So they say maybe out of these 1,000 policies that we've sold, we expect a loss ratio of around 60%. So that means that, they need around 600, they need to have around some finance that can support 600 policyholders in the long run. So do they have some money to take care of that? The other one is resources capability around the human capacity. So how will they run the business? Do they have the boots on the ground? And what happens in the long run? Then number four, or the third thing here, is that they need to develop safeguards. So consumer protection measures, how are they protect consumers? So some of these safeguards, I usually say they are irreducible minimums. For you as a regulator, consumer protection is important. So those measures have to be adhered to, data privacy protocols, and how then they address issues around data, including risk mitigation strategies. Risk management still becomes a very important aspect, including issues around corporate governance, fit and propriety tests are really, really important. So again, here there's need to really ensure that there are clear capabilities on addressing these elements. Lastly is issues around a testing plan. So preparation stage will mean that they need to give a testing plan, and this will assist you as a regulator in decision making, whether you can allow for testing or it might really require further additions as needed. Now, the testing plan kind of gives you an assurance that the company has a strategy of both testing and exit. Without a testing plan, then it might be too late for you as an organization to align on areas that require a bit of change. All right, let's look at things that you really need to think about before commencing testing. So here, our goal would be like before you assume testing, what are some of the things that Insurtech should have to complete? So what are some of the things that will require them to complete? The first thing is the risk management plan. So they should be able to identify the risks and necessary controls to mitigate them in an acceptable manner. So again, here your goal would be to look at the plan, assess that plan, and kind of have an assurance that we had an opportunity to address the risks that might arise and the risks that might cause the Insurtech not to meet its objectives for testing, but at the same time exposing your industry to further risks. The second thing is customer disclosure. They have to give you a brief on information or how they are going to explicitly get consent on data processing, commit to compensating for damages during testing, and also articulating issues around conflict resolution or dispute resolution. You wouldn't want to get into a space whereby you are testing a product and then there are disputes that are coming through and the company has no process of dealing with those grievances or disputes. So, that has to be well informed, has to be well articulated to you as a regulator for the purposes of understanding how consumer protection is managed. The third thing is dispute resolution mechanism, and here resolving all the disputes, having a very clear mechanism on how this should be resolved, including, how then, this particular process can provide confidence that as an organization, you are very keen on the process that, the company has deployed that looks at how then they manage their future exposures. Financial guarantee. What are some of the guarantees in place? Do they have deposit funds in a separate escrow account or with a trusted bank, or are they required to put up some money on lien? How then do you compute that amount? It is very important because if somebody is going to test for 10,000 people, you wouldn't expect them to put a guarantee for those 10,000. They'll have a way of which they will come up with a way of computing what will be the financial guarantee. Most of the time, in technical terms, we call this a quantum of risk. So there should be some quantum of risk that enables the companies to determine the level of guarantee that is needed. Then fifth, here we look at the monitoring and reporting. They should be able to outline testing scenarios, which is important. What are they testing? How then do they look at a performance of their indicators? So evaluating whether the company is succeeding during the testing period. So here it's more of coming up with parameters that will enable you as a regulator to determine the performance indicator and really looking at how then that moves in the future. Then lastly is issues around exit plan. They have to have a strategy. Remember, and I did mention and use an analogy of a school. If somebody is, say, at a particular level of education, then once he moves out of that to the next level, they should be like a transition plan. The same thing here. How do you graduate your innovators and how they exist in the testing phase? That should be really, really clear. So in terms of the control programs and safeguards, which you might need to think about from a regulatory perspective, is what I've been mentioning, what we call quantum limits. Now, when we talk about quantum limits, we will like to impose limits on funds per risk, funds at risk per client or in aggregate. So would you allow the company just to take as bigger, what is the level of sum assured? How then do you ensure that the company is not overly exposed around issues of the how much fund they can put at risk? Now, this should be per client. So assume that you have 10,000 clients and you say, okay, fine, this particular product offers a benefit of 1,000. Then you can be able to look at what is the risk quantum per client, and then also really look at what is the risk quantum in aggregate. Now, when it comes to aggregate, then you'll have to bring an additional assignment of, assumption that not all policies will translate into a loss. So they should be like a percentage on what really needs to be looked at. Then transaction and client limits. You also need to look at how many transactions can we allow for, how many policies can they sell, what are the limits for the clients, how many clients do you allow them to utilize. So again, these will kind of reduce the exposure and one or the other. So and there's also minimum capital requirements. Now, these will vary depending on the product and depending on the on what really on what the company is really looking to solve. So it would be like the way you look at general business, capital and life business. These will be very, I would say, boutique in terms of ensuring that there's a criteria that you're going to use to determine what would be the minimum capital. Now, the minimum capital will highly be aligned to the quantum limits. So, if there are some limits that the company can be able to undertake, then that should be able to reflect the amount of capital that it can put in place. And lastly is issues around claims handling mechanisms. How are the claims handled? Issues around consumer communication approaches. How then do you communicate? And then lastly, issues around resolution and framework. So again, that will look at how best the company handles issues around claims. Just to proceed, then there's also disclosure requirements. What are some of the disclosures that the company will have to give for these particular solutions, including issues around fee information, issues around data protection. So that one should be well thought of. Then tiered approvals will be important, whereby uh, you kind of tell them if you reach say 100 customers, then you can expand to 1,000. If it doesn't, then you need to rest or end the test. So again, you have kind of tiered approvals. Let's get to 1,000. Let's see how that goes. And then once they hit 1,000, let's get to 2,000. So it kind of gives a tiered approach when it comes to approvals. Then technical tests. So there will be an issue around if you are providing an AI platform, or then it will mean that there will be need for technical tests, including the penetration tests. Can somebody hack the system this particular organization is deploying? What is the assurance that, there'll be no data leakages from a policyholder perspective, and lastly, issues that are secondary, introducing human reviews, especially for robo advisor recommendations. So yeah, if the people are saying that we are going to use the machine to respond to our clients, it will be good to test that over time. I want to pause there and check whether there is any question before I go to testing phase.
No question.
Any other
Um,
person, if there's any question?
yeah, I was wondering for the customers, for example, the 100 customers are gonna be subject to the testing. Are they aware that it's a startup within a sandbox? Are they told? How does it work? How does the process work if, for example, it doesn't succeed and the products have to be canceled? Like, how does it go normally?
Yeah, so and you remember when we were talking about the preparation phase, um, the regulator has to be very clear on how this will be communicated and how then the customers will be aware that they are on a testing phase. So that is important that the customers will be notified that this solution that we are working on, we are testing it for the purposes of seeing how then this solution would work. Yeah, so it is part of the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Elias, there's a comment from Kagiso in the chat. I don't know if you have seen that. He wanted to know who owns the sandbox. So he says that in Bifira, they have a licensing department and a fintech department, but fintech gets involved post-licensing because the sandbox is pre-licensing. Is it better placed under the licensing department?
Yes, so it depends because you see, it's not only about licensing. This is a very continuous process. And the reason why I'm saying that it will still involve a lot of research and innovation, including tracking a number of data sets. So it requires a more collaborative effort on who owns the sandbox. And what we've seen in a number of jurisdictions is that they tend to create committees around it. So there is a owner that can be either research, it can be supervision, then kind of draw a team from different departments. Because there will be also some legal issues that might come your way that might require legal mindset to support. So there is this most time guided through a committee type of a team. Any question before I proceed? I don't know, maybe if I pause there, I would want to hear some of the practices that some of the regulators that are in this meeting are doing when it comes to application and preparation phase before I go to the testing phase. What have you seen happening and what have you implemented?
Hi, Elias.
Hi.
So I just wanted to speak on the last question that was asked about the ownership. So for us, at the initial stage, the ownership sits with the Insurtech and Innovation unit. But once the application or the solution exits the sandbox, then it's handed over to the supervision department because that is where the licensing is done. So that's the process we go through. So it's a two-tier thing. We do the management, monitoring, reviewing, but once they exit and it's time for them to have the license, we hand them over to the supervision department where the licensing department unit sits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that experience that you're sharing. Any other person? All right, let's proceed. So the next phase will be the testing phase. And the objective here is to evaluate the innovation solution under control environment. So here you've already licensed, then you say, okay, fine. We are moving to the next phase. How do we, or what do we want to see this next phase of testing? So here, there are a couple of things that will happen. So the first thing will be validate the innovation. And what we are saying about validation of the innovation is that you remember there are two things that we talked about earlier, benefits and risks. So you will try and see whether the innovation meets those two things. So monitor risk and compliance. How are they complying with some of the things that you guys are set out during the preparation phase? They'll be need to gather data and insights. How are the customers faring? Are there any complaints that are already arising? How is the premiums being paid? How are the claims being paid? Is there any customer impact? Are there claims that are already being paid? You need also to look at the gaps. What are the gaps within the process? Maybe over time you realize that the platform is not as robust as it was. So how then do we push for those particular gaps and close those particular gaps? We also need to build evidence for decision making. So you remember, after testing, you will need to decide whether this particular company exits the sandbox, or we give them an extension, or we say, okay, fine, this is a failure. There's no way that we are going to progress. And then lastly is issues around kind of having a collaboration between the regulator and the innovator. So really, really important when it comes to this level of engagement. So the next thing would be really to think about it from what are some of the areas during testing that are quite considered to be different from a normal supervisory approach, because again, you don't expect the normal supervisory approach to kind of go through the same way that we look at the other products. So the key here would be to look at the benefits and really ensure that the benefits the benefit of the solution is materializing as outlined by the applicant. So the applicant would have set up some matrices and they will have set up some results framework. How do they demonstrate that is currently being met? Then the other thing would be, are there additional risks that are emerging over and above those that you've noted during the presentation? So really the goal here is to know how then do you do risk assessment? The other thing would be, is the Insurtech adhering to the process outlined in the testing plan? So again, you need to ask yourself these questions. Are these people complying with the rules of the game? Or there are some certain areas that they're not really applying to the rule? Any question before I jump to the next? Now, let me look at this slide, and then maybe I can allow a couple of questions. But there are two things that comes in mind around the risk assessment toolkit and during testing. Now, here we will be looking at whether the new information has been made available to test or to remain maybe important to evaluate whether the initial risks and benefits still hold. So new information will be available, and then really looking at how then you evaluate initial risks and benefits to the station. Then there are two elements here. There are issues around risk erosion. And when we talk about risk erosion, will be those elements. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, your desirable goal as a regulator is to make sure that benefits and risk are well balanced, and in a way that the benefits would outweigh the risk. So here you look at issues around fraud incidences kind of are higher because you've kind of enhanced the consumer protection risk. So if there are very high incidences of fraud, then that has to be enhanced. The other one is that AML procedures are not robust. And here, what we'll be targeting would be to ensure that there's an AML risk score to make sure that we are not, helping organization not to violate the AML practices. Then benefit erosion. Here, the uptake amongst underrepresented group, whereby you really focus on you're not focusing on the underrepresented group. So the key thing would be to enhance access and usage to formal financial services, and where the solution has struggled to reach the scale, then you lower the impact of the score. Any question around this balance? Right, let me proceed to the next. So the other thing would be monitoring. How then do you do monitoring? What do you really need to get as a monitoring part of the exercise? Now, when it comes to sandbox testing, there are two ways. You can have monthly reports. Some organizations have quarterly reports for the Insurtechs. Then other organizations will have the high final report, which kind of talks about holistically, the performance that the organization have made. So in terms of the monthly interim report, you'll be able to see that these will be achieved during the testing of benefits and shares and the risks. So if you look at it from a testing phase, are we able to say what have we achieved in terms of the risks and what are some of the exposures that the company has? Statistical information is important, particularly on the test. How many products have we sold? Then the other bit would be on indications of financial and technical fraud. So are there incidences of fraud, and how can those ones be measured over time? Then lastly, issues around emerging incidences and issues around emerging benefits and risks that are not included in the application submission. So again, really looking at all those elements within your monthly report. So I don't know whether you guys receive these reports on a monthly basis. Those people that are doing the reports, how often do Insurtech gives you the report? They give you the reports. Any comment?
So for Ghana, we there's a template or a portal that is supposed to submit monthly reports to us.
All right, thank you very much for that report. Anybody that has anybody that would want to also add his comment whether they're receiving monthly reports? Then there's also what we call the final report. So here, the goal would be to look at the key indicators, similar to monthly report, but here the full details will be looking at the incidences and procedures that would be conducted to solve the problem. Then also testing, if there's any testing, what might have been the cause of failure. And then lastly, issues around, satisfaction, customers. Are they satisfied or, they're not? Any question on the final reports? And this final report comes at that particular point when you want to make a decision whether the company should exit. Right, so let me go to the next. And here I'll be talking about exits and extensions that may be necessary. So these are some of the examples really to kind of help you out when it comes to, decision making. So example here is where Insurtechs encounter challenges during testing phases, such as instances whereby customer uptake and demand fell below the anticipated risk. So what would you do as a regulator if this company comes to you that we need to be given a license? The first thing would be really to extend the time frame and see whether they can still stick to the initial exit plan, because these only to do with the customer uptake, and customer uptake maybe we just need to give them more time. Then the second one is whereby the Insurtech may may experience delays during the test on certain components, or maybe API connections, or really requiring them to, develop time from what they have initially foreseen. So here the programmers have changed, but it's more like there are certain elements that will require them to deploy for the purposes of addressing the challenges within the ecosystem. So here again, you can do an extension of the case. Then lastly, we can have Insurtechs that may face challenges in establishing partnerships and gaining access to payment services. So here you will see that in one or the other, the plans can be exited, the exit plans, but that has to be accompanied by strategies that would enable the regulator to, look at regulatory dialogue. So kind of getting people to speak, getting to speak to the licensee or the Insurtechs for the purposes of ensuring that, there's proper exploration of risk strategies. Right, so I think the last phase here would be the graduation phase. So the company has gone through the application phase, the preparation phase, the testing phase, and now it's during the graduation phase. And here again, the final reports comes in handy, evaluating the outcomes and whether the organization has met the outcomes. Then we have deployment. Then we have issues around policy regulatory guidance, because the reason why this is important for you as a regulator, this is somebody that are about to exit. And you see, when somebody exits, he can either become an insurer, or he can now join the license categories that you guys are talking about. Are they already there? What form of guidance would you provide to them when they are looking at now rolling some of these particular products in a way that they now comply with the industry. They are now pushing that through the industry process. So how then do you ensure that you provide them with guidance on what they need to do to get their license? You also need to develop an annual, a final report to ensure that you've documented the benefit and the risk, and where applicable, kind of develop a runway. Then issues around appropriate pathway within supervisory department, so you can fast track the licenses. you can also, look at regulatory mandatory, whether, you need to amend the license or amend the products or activity. Right. So any question around graduation phase? Right. So I think the last would be issues around letter of no objection. So if you fast track the license and you've kind of come up with a way, you can either give a letter of no objection, you can look at pushing them toward partnership. So you need to have a very proper process on how this would be taken. So most of the time you'll get that the regulators start the sandboxing process. And by the time the organization is about to graduate, you don't know where do they go, how do they transition these companies to where they should. And that should be clearly articulated just to make sure that the company kind of now operates within the spectrums of the regulations that are needed. Akagiso?
Yes, just a question on the aspect of regulatory amendments, because I don't know how other jurisdictions handle it, but for us it's usually a lengthy process because there's board approval, then the ministry and things like that. So I just wanted to know if it's possible to have a combination of those outcomes, like say a letter of no objection conditional on the amendment of regulations, or can the regulatory amendment processes be initiated prior to the graduation phase?
Right, very good question. Let me get here and then I should be able to answer that on what I've seen in different jurisdictions. But anybody within the team that would be happy to give that a shot? Anybody? Right. So as people gather to answer that question, what I've seen in the different this depends on the jurisdiction and the process of amending the law. So either you are coming up with a new license category or you are coming up with a new product category, and that will require an amendment. So there are some countries whereby the process for amending do not deserve to go to parliament. There are certain jurisdiction that, by even just changing a small piece within the act, then it has to go through the full process. So most of the time, this would happen after where, because you don't know whether this project will succeed or not. So you cannot start changing the law if you haven't known the outcome of the testing. So in circumstances whereby, the company has been successful, then the process of initiating the process of coming up with a regulatory amendment can commence. But with that, then you can give them a letter of no objection, maybe, in the interim as you kind of work around the changes on law. On top of that, then there is need to think about partnerships because, these organizations that would be looking at rolling out these things and might need to carry risk, then they might need to pass that risk to another entity that is licensed through some form of partnership. Any other additional question?
Yes, maybe as a follow-up, because I'm well, when you were given the answer, I was just thinking, in terms of, because essentially, currently none of the regulators, be it banking, non-banking, have a sandbox. I've seen approaches like the South African approach, where they have the intergovernmental, I think, fintech working group, where they
Yeah.
now have a combined regulatory sandbox, where you have the tax authority, the Reserve Bank, the FIC, and all that. And I think that seems to be a bit more ideal, because it's more of a one-stop thing. All your aspects get addressed in the same sandbox, be it AML and all that. Now, I think the question I wanted to then understand is, how involved can the lawmakers be? Because as a regulator, we recommend policies and amendments and the like, but the Attorney General's office is the one that actually puts forth the bills and the amendments to Parliament. Is it a possible avenue to explore maybe some kind of endorsement by the Attorney General's office, to then say whatever amendments that come as informed by the sandbox will be accelerated?
Yeah, so it depends again with the level of risk that the organization sees that they would want to take. And that will depend again predominantly on the risk assessment tool, because if the law is not existing at the moment and the company would want to go to market, given that it has successfully tested, because this graduation happens after testing, and now you've told the company, look, now you can go and sell this product, but before you go out, then you need to meet certain requirements. So that will mean that they'll be required to meet those requirements, unless now you realize that there is a new licensing category that you need to develop. And that's why I mentioned two things here: a license category that needs to be amended, and a product. You wouldn't really get new laws that will kind of change things, such as, say, corporate governance or what. So are we going to put an additional license category or an additional product category? So those the amendments might align around those two areas, and most of the time these amendments might go to, say, Parliament. But in the meantime, how does the company operate? Will they be required to have a letter of no objection as they kind of comply with all the other requirements as needed? Now, the biggest element and what we usually advise regulators to take a lot of cognizance on is what we call regulatory arbitrages. So you don't want to have a scenario whereby an organization will require you to develop some regulations that will only benefit them as an organization, and have, in a way, reduce the scrutiny that you might need to have on them. So it's kind of, you're giving them an opportunity to not to get through, and not to be guided by all the regulations, but some regulations that they feel are more aligned to their business model. So I think during the determination of the regulatory changes, we really need to ask ourselves, even before we go to the amendments, are we not having enough ways in which this particular company can exit the sandbox? Can we explore with them? And that's why we did mention that you need to kind of document the risks and benefits and have appropriate graduation pathway that will even give you who will work with these particular entities within the supervisory department. So that is something that will be a bit critical and important.
Hello, Elias.
Yes.
So with the last point you made, where we should ensure that it's just not in the interest of the player in the sandbox, can you, if there's a typical case that happened that you can share with us so we can clearly understand how that works?
Yeah, so let me give you an example. You'll get that and most of the time you'll get that there is a company that comes up with a totally new way of distributing a product. And in this particular case, then they are not using agents, they're not using brokers, but they want to distribute this particular product through, say, supermarkets or through an aggregator that do not qualify, say, as a broker or as an agent. And, you might need to think about a way of licensing those particular agents. So, or those particular distributor, a new channel of distribution, let me not call them agents. So with that, then you'll have to go to the um, the the um, the legislation that deals with the registration of channels of distribution, and then kind of introduce a new channel of distribution that at the long run can be utilized by any other player, because most of the time when you get the company out of their sandbox through graduation, they should be able to meet, they should be able they can be reached out through they can reach out any customer whatsoever at any particular point. So in this particular case, then you'll have to develop a new channel of distribution, and that license has to be, in one or the other, be issued, and should not only focus on being issued to one organization, but any organization that might want to roll a similar solution to what this particular company was testing has the capability of doing that, because you know we are not testing products that are going to be exclusive, or something that are going to only be exclusive to them. They might have an exclusivity around the name of the product, but in terms of the risk, this risk can be carried by any other institution based on the variability that they kind of roll out during the process of testing. So the example is that there's a new channel of distribution. That channel might require a license. It might be a new product that is bundled and all of that. Then you might need to create a new category of the product that might require a regulatory amendment. But ideally, on other regulations, then you would really experience any changes within the law. But mostly on the licensing of a particular channel, or a particular insurance, or a particular type of an underwriter, or on a product whereby you've kind of come up with a product category that is quite different from the existing product categories. Rita, any follow-up on this?
No, Elias, I'm very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other question? All right. So there are a couple of things, and these are the graduation pathways within a sandbox. So there are 4 ways, and it's the same thing with what most of the time we call career pathways, or the way a student, once you finish your exams, there are ways in which they can be taken through the market. So there are 4 possible outcomes for innovators testing in a sandbox, and each has an important implication, and they will require support from you as regulators. And one is that the participant is ready to graduate and fits in an existing licensing category. This is the most easy. So you've graduated him, within his exit plan, because remember we said that before somebody even comes to the sandbox, you must have like an exit plan. And what you see here is that the exit plan fits well with the existing licensing category. That is very easy, very seamless, and doesn't really give a headache to the regulator and also the innovator. The second phase is that the applicant is ready to graduate and fits an existing licensed category but cannot meet the regulatory requirements. So testing done, existing license category available, but they cannot meet the regulatory requirements. And this might mean that, there are certain other additional information that is required, maybe capital and so forth. So how then do you deal with that? Will you request the company like, look, we want to give you an extension, or are you going to give a letter of no objection so that they can start, but not fully 100% in terms of fit for purpose and license ready, but you are giving them some time, a letter of no objection that we are giving you 3 months to make sure that you align with all regulatory requirements. The third is whereby the applicant is ready to graduate, but does not fit any of the licensing existing categories. So here is where now you really need to now start thinking about amendment. And this would be, are we looking into amending the existing laws? And how does that then connect with the existing structures? Then the fourth is basically determine that that the applicants are not require a license to operate in the market. There are those guys that you'll just realize that, okay, these guys, they don't even need to be licensed, but they have went through and tested their solution. How then do you go around that? Any question around these 4 pathways? Right, let me go to the next, where now we have a plenary before we close it up, because our last session will now be on the tool, and I'll kind of illustrate what we'll be developing. So here, I would want you to think about what are the prerequisites for success in a local context. How do you say that the Insurtech is successful? How do you measure success within a sandbox? And 2, what are some of the internal responsibilities and structures for some sandbox implementation? I think what we can do, we can, Alex, if there's a possibility of putting us in 2 groups, and in this time round, we'll discuss both questions because they are both important. So maybe you can break us into 2 groups. Let's have some prerequisites of what will determine a success from a local context. And then the second bit of it would be, what are some of the responsibilities and structures for that you can put in place to support the implementation of the sandbox? Alex, maybe you can break us out into groups.
Elias, Alex had to step away.
Wow. All right. So I think maybe instead of us doing that, let us then just do it here as a plenary. And maybe what I'll request us, if you can, I can give you 2 minutes as a team to reflect on these 2 questions, and we can quickly jump into the discussion.
I was saying that, Neil, I haven't, I can actually just put you into the groups. You need how many, like 2 minutes?
No, yeah, then if you are there, kind of just put us into groups, two groups. Then different teams can discuss these two questions. And then you can set this for 5 minutes discussion within the groups, then we can come back. Welcome back. So it will be good to hear the responses that you guys have come up with. So maybe before we close in the next few minutes, and then I'll be able to lay out the part 3. Anybody that would want to go first?
We had some really good responses from Kagiso and Justice. So would you like to share, Justice Kagiso?
Okay, was thinking about prerequisites for success in the local context. I think leadership and institutional commitment is one key, is one prerequisite that will account for success. When there's commitment throughout the whole institution and there's leadership, and it's not like we've set a unit to sit somewhere and someone is there doing his own thing. But if the whole institution has that commitment and leadership, then it is a prerequisite for success.
Yes, and I think mine was on resource readiness. In that, while I think it's a big wish list for us to implement a regulatory sandbox, it's become very apparent that we need to have the right resources in place, the right resources in terms of human resources and technical resources as well. So the ability to have a successful sandbox framework will rely heavily on the resources that we've dedicated to said sandbox.
All right, so maybe just to kind of lay out, because these questions we'll be able to answer them on our next presentation, and I'll just want to share a snapshot of what these will entail. Now, in our next part, we'll be talking about an application risk assessment tool, and from a local context perspective, remember there are two things that we talked about on benefits and risks, but also through the testing process, there are certain parameters that will determine success. So, for instance, under the risk part, we will be talking about how many clients are we looking for this company to achieve. And based on the tracking that we'll be tracking over time, we look at how many of these customers have they managed to bring in. So this just to give a snapshot, and I would really do a long deep dive on it. But this kind of will give us a snapshot of what the tool does and what it doesn't do. So it will help us quantify expected benefits and risks. Will kind of bring a combination of level of benefits and risks into an overall assessment, and overly try and see whether benefits will offset the risks that the solution is trying to put in place. It will kind of also help us structure our thinking in a more formalized way. So in terms of all of the things that you guys are currently thinking about, and what you are currently doing with your sandboxes, we'll try and put that in a structured manner. It will also help us record inputs and reasoning for future reference, and also allow us to track the risks and benefit profile of the applicants across cohorts. What it will not do for us, it will not make a decision for us, but it kind of gives us insights on how then we will make better decisions. So help us better understand potential benefits and risks and how we combine them. but we'll still need to apply our own judgment to reach a decision. The tool, by the way, will not get us, will not get to the answer. It's not to help us get the answer, because it's not the answer, but it's in a way kind of giving us some insights on what we really need to do. Because again, a lot of things will have to look at other elements to make sure that we have better insights in terms of how we make our decisions. So next week I'll be introducing this tool for us to kind of do a deep dive on it, on how then you can assess your various risks within the process. We'll start it from this level. So make sure that you have this diagram at the back of your mind, because the tool that we are going to develop will highly focus on these two steps in terms of ensuring that we make a decision on whether we need to approve or not approve the innovation that has come our way. So I'll pause there and take it back to the team, Neil or Alex, as we look forward for next week to finalize on this tool, and maybe we'll get you guys testing it within your sandboxes, and maybe we can share some practical results that you guys will come up with within your markets. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Elias. I don't know if Alex is back, but I will go ahead and proceed. So again, thank you everyone for attending. Again, it's critical that everybody shows up and participate in these sessions. I certainly want to thank Elias for the excellent presentation for today. And I guess we'll wrap it up and let everybody go, and we'll see you next week. So again, thank you, everyone.